The Epstein files should never have been released. Yeah, I had to double check that title a couple times myself. More than a few times, really. And then the source as well, the New York Times. Immediately I was like, okay, what is this? Some Substack writer trying to produce the single most obscene headline imaginable so that he can pay his mortgage on his house that he's failing before the mafiosos come in, break his kneecaps, and drag him out by the short hairs of his nutsack? No, it's the New York bloody Times writing, the Epstein files should never have been released. Oh boy. Well, I still suspect some sort of massive clickbait here, but fortunately, that's why God invented archive sites. So let's see what Mr. Daniel Richman has to say, shall we? Every day seems to bring new reports of financiers, academics, politicians, and royalty. Yes, I know. The royal Norwegian princess was in there as well. The crown princess wife. Adopted into the royal family, mind you, not of actual royal blood. She was in there too, associating with Epstein, writing cute little funny SMSs back and forth with the convicted pedophile. After conviction. Why? She is retarded. What can I say? Who calls it up to Jeffrey Epstein, a convicted sex offender whose predation took a horrendous toll on innocent lives. With accountability for people in power in short supply, it can be hard to see a downside in the huge dump of documents related to Mr. Epstein and his various associations. Indeed, as, of course, in a perfect universe here, we should never have to see any of this. It should be utterly irrelevant to 99% of people what the Epstein documents actually are. The only thing we should have to know about them is that when dozens of Hollywood celebrities are dragged screaming from their million-dollar mansions by 12-man teams of police officers, their fingernails bleeding on the pristine marble floor as they're hauled out, is that they were arrested for being, well, nonsense. Simple as. Easy peasy, really. We shouldn't actually have to see pictures of Bill Clinton or Hunter Biden in there and then see nothing happen to them thereafter. That's the problem. That's why the release of the Epstein documents are such a good thing, because at the very least then, whilst there will still not be any actual accountability, it will set the pot a-boiling yet again, as people slowly come to the realization that, oh my god, we are actually run by a cabal of satanic pedophiles. Which, whilst that realization in and of itself will sadly not lead to a particularly militant, can't say that on YouTube, response, it will, however, lower people's, how do I put it, pain threshold when it comes to governmental abuses in general. But we should recognize the release of millions of pages of the Epstein files both a sign of institutional failure and a cause for concern. If our justice system were working properly, the public would never have such access. Ah, I see here. Again, I actually do in part agree with that. In the not-too-distant past, most people would probably have at least grudgingly accepted a regime in which prosecutors and law enforcement agents sorted through materials from a sprawling investigation and made public only those portions needed to properly handle a case. The additional information that might interest us and perhaps even help improve society would remain secret. Federal prosecutors could generally be trusted to focus on their narrow criminal enforcement mission and to not abuse the tools given to them for that limited purpose. Right, there's another kicker, isn't it? Grudging trust. So, I don't even believe it was grudging. I believe it was actually genuine. For the majority of recent modern history, most of us did actually believe that the government, albeit incompetent, wasn't actually actively evil at the very least. Particularly from a Norwegian point of view, we have had a huge blind spot around this for ages, where we simply assumed that corruption was a problem in other countries, and one that we basically didn't have at all, that we'd solved it through the superior moral characters of our politicians. Yeah, well, as you said, there's been a fair few arrests around the Epstein files happening in Norway as well. And hey, you know what? At the very least, in my country, the police actually visit these people and, grab their apartments and ransack them for evidence. Whether or not they actually do anything with it is a different question, which is still up in the air. But hey, at least they're acting. Meanwhile, in America, what if anything at all has happened? Calls for the Epstein files release predate the Trump administration. They're now online and searchable because too many Americans didn't trust the Justice Department's leadership with control of them. Didn't trust the government in general. And it's not even too many Americans, it's everyone. It's the opposition as well, and hell, even the sitting Republicans. In the past, departmental leaders could limit suspicion about their motives by conspicuously leaving matters such as this to career subordinates, rather than political appointees, seen by so many as having fired or driven out prosecutors and agents who refused to become tools of President Trump's will. Attorney General Pam Bondi lacked credibility. She couldn't get away with asking the public to rely on the apolitical and independent judgment of those who remained. The eventual result was the Epstein Files Transparency Act. Now this too is utter horseshit. Has Trump dropped the ball on this? Oh good god, has he? On so many fucking levels, but I will also point out this could have been released by Democrats long ago. Trump is far from unique in his sins here, and honestly, I have no idea why he won't just release them. I mean, so far, the only mentions of Trump is him basically going like, oh, that Epstein's a really bad guy. I'm gonna report him. I'm gonna call the FBI and tell them to check out that Maxine Gilman Waters, the woman person in there, whose name has now escaped me. Anyways, that's all that he's been mentioned in the Epstein files so far, except that brief period a few months ago where the leftists were like, oh my god, he's mentioned, and then people brought up the small section that they'd forgotten to read and or willfully ignored, saying, these are highly suspicious allegations that we have been completely and utterly unable to corroborate with absolutely anything at all. So far, Trump, besides not releasing the goddamn fucking files, has come out smelling like roses from all of this, so one wonders why he doesn't just bathe in the fucking waters. The release of the files also caused for concern because so much of the raw investigative material in them, untold layers of hearsay, unverified accusation, and vague circumstantial connections ought to not be released to the public to pick over. There we have the real reason right there. There are a lot of elites right now who have been mentioned, and a lot of left-wing people as well, who have been mentioned and who don't like being mentioned because, okay, I am willing to even accept the idea that there will have been a lot of people who were friendly with Epstein for diplomatic reasons, simply because he was still, even after his conviction, widely known as an incredibly prestigious and powerful individual. Thus, if you are the diplomat of some company or country or whatever, you are probably going to be sending him nice, respected SMSs, and with that leaks, it's gonna look like you're trying to be his friend. And the majority of people aren't going to understand the technical diplomatic niceties included and expected in such conversation. But there's probably also a lot of people there who do need to actually be dragged out into the streets and be given a... can't say that on YouTube. It had to do with an enema anyways, don't worry, you didn't miss out on anything. We don't know the degree to which the Justice Department has appropriately or inappropriately withheld or redacted documents. We do know that any effort to protect victims was woefully inadequate, as explicit photos and identifying information of many women and possibly girls have been found in the files. The government obligation not to re-victimize people ought to be one of its highest priorities. Here it failed. Well, I'll also point out that has actually been one of the primary reasons why they've been hesitant to release them, and most of this has actually come out via the leaks, so this too isn't actually the government's fault. Should the government have simply dumped them all? Honestly, I believe that would have been the best approach. Fuck re-victimization. This is obviously a situation that requires far more, well, how do I put it, strident action, frankly. We give federal prosecutors and agents a broad range of information gathering tools that private parties and even most government agencies aren't allowed to use. At the heart of criminal enforcement authority is the power to invade privacy. Legally available tools include search warrants, wiretaps, grand jury subpoenas, and administrative subpoenas. That is how criminal investigators access our emails, our private conversations, our phone banks. Where are you going with this whole flop? Where are you Oh. I see now. These coercive investigation tools can have been misused, as when prosecutors and FBI agents illegally rummaged through my emails and computer files. I see. So, about that whole the Epstein list shouldn't have been released topic, and your emails, are you sure they didn't... Did you delete anything? Any alternative emails you'd like to provide? And I get even that this is part of his argument here, right? That people will throw spurious accusations at individuals because they've merely even been mentioned in the Epstein files. And I get that, but this is kind of one of those Spanish Inquisition moments right here, where the rot and the crime is so deep and so fucking dark that, yeah, we're going to be suspending a fair few of your human privileges for the time being of this investigation until the populace is thoroughly assured that the pedophile Satan worshippers are no longer in positions of power. I'm sorry, it seems like a worthwhile cause, frankly. Hey, one can even argue the whole idea of one who gives away a part of his liberty to remain safe deserves none, but I don't know if Benjamin Franklin knew that many satanic pedophiles. I hope not that many. The tools we give the government are justified not only by the importance of the criminal enforcement mission, but by the care and professional judgment prosecutors and agents are required to exercise with the information they obtain with those tools. Government secrecy may conceal misconduct or atrocities judgment we have yet to understand. The decision by U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta almost 2 decades ago not to charge Mr. Epstein, as Epstein was ultimately convicted in state court in 2018 after taking a plea deal, still prosecutors' use of the materials they collect is ordinarily bound by the mission, to charge individuals or not to charge them, to satisfy disclosure obligations after a case is brought, and if possible, to convince a jury to obtain a guilty plea. Now, this of course is again where the reason why they must be released exists, because very clearly the entire system has simply just failed on this point, utterly and completely on every single solitary level, losing thus in turn the public's trust in the institutions. They can no longer assume that the agents are actually doing this for their betterment. They cannot even assume that they are politically loyal at all to anyone who is even in power, or politically loyal to the country either. We have no way of tracing, how do I put it, allegiances anymore, and thus people will begin to wonder where exactly these people's allegiances do lie. And when somebody brings forth a more and more unfortunately realistic sounding scenario of certain cults running rampant, well, listen, you haven't given us a much better explanation for any of this, so bonfires? When materials collected in a criminal investigation get released in bulk for public consumption, the justification for the coercive and privacy-invading tools we give investigators get a lot weaker. No, it doesn't. It means that they should check their fucking security, but that doesn't mean that the tools themselves become any less relevant, because without those tools, we wouldn't even have had them to begin with. What kind of backwards logic is this? Institutions claiming to protect users or customer privacy might be more likely to resist valid use of these tools. Witnesses who would otherwise speak to investigators about sensitive matters might start to rethink whether they want to provide grist for internet searchers. I mean, that's always been the case. I don't see even how that's relevant here. We have to reckon with what happens when a huge investigation whore with its swirling mix of gossip, casual association, and possible criminal misconduct is open up for public viewing. The justice system should never be the only means of holding people accountable. The power of shame can be a good thing, and some reputations deserve to be tarnished, but informal accountability process can easily slide into misuse of unfiltered source material. But au contraire, mon ami, if we have already indeed agreed and concluded that the established systems and institutions are not capable of bringing these individuals to bear, then well, fuck. This is going to be our only option now, is it? And our only real complaint is going to be that the populace is going to be nowhere near as aggressive as the SWAT teams should have been. At a time when the Justice Department seems intent on filing the criminal docket with baseless prosecutions of its perceived enemies, many might not mourn a spectacle that highlights the lack of public confidence in the department, or one that appears to weaken the justification for extraordinary prosecutorial powers generally. But we need to think about a future in which real crimes fill the docket, when the coercive information-gathering tools are needed to pursue them. Those of us who want to preserve those tools and the justifications for them ought to regret the dump of the Epstein files, even as we rummage through them ourselves. No. I don't accept the argument that the tools themselves have been weakened in any real way, and I do not accept the argument that this somehow makes the release less necessary, even. One could again argue that it shouldn't have happened in the perfect world, but much like the communists, utopia is bullshit and remains a nonsensical dream. And frankly, at this point in time, societal pressure and shame appears to be the sole effective means we have to enforce any sort of consequences upon the majority of these individuals. This feels like I've fallen mostly for a clickbait article, doesn't it? But still, it is an interesting question, isn't it? Have the tools been misused? Not really. Have their leaking been a mistake? No, not at all, not truly. Honestly, it was necessary and should have been far more wildly and far more earlier and by an official agency source. And thirdly, is this indicative of a larger problem? Yes, in that the institutions appear to be run by people who have a vested interest in protecting the literally worst monsters we've uncovered since we found camps in Poland. And yet, sadly, nothing will be done about it. At least not in the US, and at the least, not yet. Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you all very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again soon. Then, have a good day.